With not long left until Armageddon, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the book of Revelation. What does it say that Harold Camping and his followers believe will happen on May 21st? The text purports to be an account of a vision had by an apostle named John on the island of Patmos. Tradition has seen this John to be the same John who wrote the fourth Gospel and the three epistles of John, but others, including scholars, believe Revelation to be the product of an altogether different person, sometimes called John of Patmos. The author begins by describing his encounter with one like a son of man, who addresses 7 churches in Asia, providing both encouragement and reproof to each of them. This individual, who calls himself the first and the last, and says he holds the keys to death and Hades, is meant to be Jesus. After delivering his messages to the 7 churches, Jesus takes John on a tour of the apocalypse. He is shown the throne in heaven in a series of 7 events. A lamb, looking as if it had been slain, again a representation of Jesus, opens 7 seals on a scroll, followed by angels sounding 7 trumpets and pouring 7 bowls on the earth. Then the fall of Babylon is predicted, a 1,000-year period of imprisonment for the forces of darkness, after which Satan is released and defeated, and finally the new heaven and new earth arrive. Some may be surprised to hear that the rapture is nowhere in the book of Revelation. This idea originates from 1 Thessalonians 4:15-17, and there is debate among various denominations as to when it will take place amidst the events of the end times. However, this view of Armageddon is itself one among several. The futurist interpretation believes all or most of the vision in Revelation will be fulfilled in a time yet to come, shortly before the second coming of Jesus. The preterist interpretation argues that the vision in Revelation reflects things that took place in the 1st century. When one looks at the symbolism utilized by the author, it becomes hard to imagine that he was not speaking of his own time. Perhaps the most famous of these is the identity of the beast. The number of the beast, Revelation 13:18 reads, is the number of a man. The Greek and Hebrew alphabets have numerical equivalents, and when written in Hebrew, the name Neron Caesar adds to 666. But additionally, if written as Nero without the N, we get 616, the alternate number of the beast that is found in some ancient manuscripts. There has been no other name identified that can represent both 666 and 616 in Hebrew. But why is Nero the beast of John's Revelation? Aside from persecuting the early Christians, Nero was rumored to eventually return from the grave after his death in 68 CE. Augustine of Hippo reported on this myth, known as the Nero Redivivus legend, as late as the 5th century. As a consequence of the rumor, at least 3 men rose up who claimed to be Nero reincarnated. During the reign of Domitian, which is also the time frame in which modern biblical scholars have placed the book of Revelation, one of these Nero imitators even managed to gain the support of the Parthians, and war nearly broke out, as Suetonius and Tacitus report. The contrast of this to the wounding and healing of the beast in Revelation 13:3, and the reference to the 8th king, who is also one of the earlier 7 kings, makes the Nero Redivivus legend a likely influence, not to mention the blasphemous mockery Christians might have seen in the rumored resurrection of one of their chief persecutors. Recalling the Nero imitator who managed the support of the Parthians, we find interesting relation to the 4 horsemen. The first horseman carries a bow, wears a crown, and rides out as a conqueror bent on conquest. This could symbolize a Parthian invasion, which was certainly a fear among Rome at the time, as Tacitus describes it, since the Parthian Empire was almost equal to Rome in power, and had developed a reputation of terror from annihilating a Roman army at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BCE. The bow was even the favored weapon of the Parthians. Following the first horseman would come civil war, famine, and plague. Depicting Rome as Babylon was a common motif of the late 1st century, as we find it in other texts like 4th Esdras, 2nd Baruch, and the Sibylline oracles. Thus, when the author of Revelation refers to the whore of Babylon as seated on 7 hills, ruling over the kings of the earth, the corrupter of nations, the persecutor of the saints, and the center of the world's merchandise, it is not difficult to grasp that Rome is intended to be Babylon. Rome was known as the city on 7 hills, and a coin discovered from the reign of the Roman Emperor Vespasian even depicts a woman sitting upon 7 hills. As the force that had destroyed the Jewish temple and persecuted Christians under emperors like Nero and Domitian, Rome was indeed seen as a powerful enemy in the late 1st and early 2nd centuries. One particularly interesting feature of Revelation is just how much it owes to other texts like Ezekiel and Daniel. Both Ezekiel and John are exiles when the doors of heaven are opened to them in a vision. The Spirit comes to each of them, and they see a radiant figure seated on a heavenly throne. Around the throne, both see 4 living creatures, each with the faces of a lion, an ox, a human, and an eagle. The one on the throne then hands John or Ezekiel a scroll with writing on both sides, which they are then instructed to eat. Eating the scroll represents internalizing the prophecy, and the prophet is then empowered to go proclaim his message, Ezekiel to the Israelites and John to the nations. The scroll with 7 seals that is opened in Revelation may be a reference to the book of Daniel, in which the prophecies are sealed up or not to be fulfilled until the time of the end. The author of Revelation likely considered the events of his own time to be coming in fulfillment of Daniel's prophecies about the apocalypse. In contrast to the sealing up of Daniel's visions, showing that they are of distant events, the book of Revelation is specifically not to be sealed because the time is near. Daniel has a vision of 4 great beasts rising out of the sea, the 4th having 10 horns. In Revelation, a beast rises from the sea having 10 horns and 7 heads. The 7 heads are added to attribute this 4th beast to Rome with its 7 hills. In the Septuagint version of Daniel, there are many Greek similarities with Revelation. A beast with 10 horns rises out of the sea. One of the horns speaks boastfully and wages war upon the saints. The beast is given power over them for a time, and times, and half a time, or 3.5 years. The similarities to Revelation 13 are striking. These are only a few ways in which Revelation borrows elements from Ezekiel and Daniel, but they should make the point well enough. Revelation appears to be the work of a late 1st century Christian trying to understand God's plan in the midst of corruption within the Christian congregations, persecution from the Romans, and the threat of foreign invasion. I don't believe the author was writing of events thousands of years into the future, nor do I believe he had any visions at all. Like the Apocalypse in Daniel was written to provide an answer for the destruction of Jerusalem and the profanation of the temple, and the little Apocalypse in the Gospel of Mark was written to provide an answer for the destruction of the Second Temple, Revelation is another attempt to explain suffering and misfortune in a religious world.